I'd like to thank everyone for coming. As most of you know, Hammond Harkins Galleries is new to the Short North. We opened here a little over 2 weeks ago, after 18 years in our previous location in Bexley. So White Noise is our inaugural exhibition in this new space. And we are very pleased to announce that there was a review in today's paper about the show. Peter Tonguet came in and saw the show and did a very nice write-up. So if you haven't checked it out yet, it's in today's paper. So today we're going to have our artist talk featuring the two artists whose works are on display, and that is Laura Alexander and Andrea Myers. This is our first two-person exhibition at Hammond Harkins Galleries together, or anywhere, I think. Whenever we've put their work together, it was always in a group show with other artists, and we always put them next to one another because they seem to work very well together visually and for other reasons. So we thought it'd be perfect for them to have their own show together. The two have exhibition histories that overlap, independent of Hammond Harkins Galleries. They also have some shared accomplishments. They have exhibited together in group shows at the Columbus Museum of Art and also at the Toledo Museum of Art. They have both participated in the juried exhibition ArtPrize at Grand Rapids, Michigan, although those were in separate years. And they are both recipients of individual artist fellowships from the Greater Columbus Arts Council. Individually, they have incredible resumes, especially since they're so young. There's a lot to go through. There's a lot to go through, so I will just give you the most important things and the most recent accomplishments. Laura, who's from the Columbus area, grew up near Columbus. She started out very early knowing what she was going to do and took some art classes at Fort Hays, our local arts high school. And then she went and got her BFA at the Maryland Institute College of Arts. And then she got her MFA at the University of Washington, where she focused in fibers. She has received recently the 2015 Individual Excellence Award from the Ohio Arts Council. And then I think it was last year she's fulfilled her residency in Dresden that she received from the Greater Columbus Arts Council. She was also chosen for the Columbus Makes Art, Art Makes Columbus campaign. There's a video of her that shows her and her work that I think you can see on television, and I think also at the Gateway before they show films, and in other places where they feature Laura, in addition to some other great Columbus artists, as an example of how vibrant the arts are in Columbus. Andrea grew up in Westerville. She got both her BFA and her MFA at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And for her MFA, she focused in fiber and material studies. She was an adjunct professor at the Columbus College of Art and Design. And right now, she is assistant professor in sculpture at Kent State University. Next month, she will be participating in a symposium, a textile symposium in Latvia. And next month, she will be participating in a show she co-curated at the Cultural Arts Center downtown called The Whiteness of the Whale. So, as artists and also as individuals, I'm sure they're very, very busy, which leads me to my first question. Their work seems to me to be about process as much as it is about the end product. So first of all, a lot of time is involved. When people come in, and it seems to be more apparent with Laura's work, but with both of you. But it comes up more, I think, with Laura's work when people realize that those paper pieces are done with an X-Acto by hand. Shortly after that, one of the first questions is, like, how much time did she spend making that? So there is a lot of time, and then that time is filled with a lot of activity. There's a lot of cutting, tearing, painting, layering. Could each of you please explain to us like how you work? Like, lead us through the process of when you make something. And we can begin with either one.
Do you want to start? Or?
You can go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have kind of multiple trajectories in my artistic practice. So I have some things that become more gestural, but then take longer amounts of time. But namely, the representation here in the gallery are the paper pieces and textile works, and then the collaborative installation that I did with Jeffrey Hayes from OSU. So in terms of process, I like experimenting with different processes. I like developing new directions in my process. I'm drawn to fabric and paper because of the two-dimensionality of it, and to use that to build and accrue layers to make it three-dimensional. So I approach my work thinking about that space, and I think Laura does too, that space between two and three-dimensionality, and then kind of go from there. And it's kind of a domino effect in my process, so one piece will then eventually lead me to another piece. For instance, I have the piece Soft Swarm that is a compilation. It's by, what's this piece called of yours?
Oh, so that's
Chroma.
What is it
there you
called?
go, Chroma.
Chroma, okay. So the piece that's by Chroma, it's comprised of all remnant material. I don't tend to throw anything away, because when I'm tearing away paper or I'm cutting away fabric, the remnants are as interesting to me as the solids that the materials are creating. So that remnant piece is just all the little pieces of fabric that I cut away, and then I save those and then sew them back into a whole. So I'm always kind of looking for new windows or opportunities in my existing processes to then lead me to the next process or challenge or problem that I'm creating for myself.
And your paper pieces are the ones that are torn.
Yes.
And as I always explain to people, and I think this is accurate, she does her pile, you have an idea in advance of how you want the layers to go. And so you will paint individual layers using a silk screen, and then you assemble that stack, and you glue that around the edges?
I'll take flat pieces of paper that I've screen printed or painted on, and then glue them together, and then tear back into them. And I'm really not I generally know what colors are embedded, but a lot of it is just kind of happy accident or revealing things, the layers that I had forgotten were there. So there's kind of an element of surprise that happens when I'm working back into them.
Yeah. You have some control, but not as much control as Laura does when she's using an X-Acto.
Right.
And then you just kind of peel away, kind of burrow into your stack.
Yep.
So Laura?
And then I work in the reverse on my pieces, so if you pick up the first layer, you can usually see a bunch of pencil marks and whatever, but just to keep the paper nice and pristine. And then I kind of usually have a plan with some sort of pattern, and I sometimes change how I work in that pattern throughout the piece. And this is the first show I've used color for, besides like a little bit of gold leaf here and there, or a little grayscale here and there. So for me as an artist, I like to introduce new materials, but only when I feel like I'm ready for them and the work needs it. So working with color was really fun for me because I didn't know exactly what would happen each time. So I kind of go into the little pieces as experiments and then bring what I learned in those little pieces into bigger pieces. But then for how I make the piece, I cut the first layer, then put the next layer under it, and either plot the pattern from there, or I just actually cut through the first layer into the second layer. So everything's done backwards, stacked backwards, and then when I hang them, I flip them around the other way. But it was fun for me to see kind of how the color would change, because I would paint the color beforehand. And
it's on the back side.
It's on the back side of the paper.
So all the color you see in Laura's work is a reflection.
It's all reflected color.
Reflective color.
So for me, it was another way to make my work take even longer to make.
I think there's a good point to that too, though, because I think as artists, at least for myself, I'm always kind of like a discontent in a good way person, where once I kind of feel comfortable in my process, I wanted to then just kind of pull the rug out from under myself somehow, or challenge myself again. So I could see why you would do that. You get to know it too well, and you want to kind of throw a wrench in it. Yeah.
But I think everything you add or everything you do to change your process, it leads to more sophistication in the work. So, I mean, it's worth time well spent for me, but.
Okay, another question I have has to do with, I think you both kind of talked about that a little bit, dealing with 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. I've often thought of your work, for both of you, it involves both additive and subtractive processes. And then when it comes time to try and define it, say what it is, it becomes a little hard to do. This work right here, I think, is a very good example of Andrea's, that it's a fabric piece. it hangs on the wall. When you are done with it and you put it away, you fold it up like a shawl. It's made out of fabric. But it's also very sculptural. The surface is very topographical. And then just in general, I think the way that you use color is the way a painter uses color. And then you're professor of sculpture at Kent State. So it seems like both of you, I think, like kind of playing in between mediums. That's accurate, right? And how would you describe what you do? So if you had to say, what's your medium? So I think I've heard sculptural used to describe your work also, but how would you yourself describe it?
I mean, I can tell you that I don't know. I never liked to pigeonhole myself. I was the kid in art school that every time I chose a major, I changed my major. So I ended up with a general fine arts major.
I can relate to that.
But I mean, I think as artists, you have to be good at, you want to be good at everything. So you want to be a good drawer, a good painter, a good sculptor. So I think your aesthetic, you pick up different things and try to figure it out. And I mean, I don't know. I think you could take either any of our pieces and look at them as a painting or as a sculpture. Yeah.
And it seems like that's required of artists more and more.
Yeah.
You don't really pigeonhole yourself so much.
Right,
You have to be able to do different mediums.
Yeah. Your original question was like, how would you define yourself? I think is what you said.
How would you define?
Like, what do you?
In terms of medium, how would if you had to say this is?
I always say I'm a paper artist or paper sculptor.
Paper sculptor.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll just say I'm a maker, and it depends on my idea what then I use for that idea. I don't want to be pigeonholed, and I have a love for materials and color and all the formal elements of painting and sculpture and fiber art. So I think because of postmodernism, artists today don't have to be like, well, I'm just a painter. Like it's a broader spectrum. So I think of myself as a maker, and I let the ideas and the materials, maybe the idea comes first and then the materials, or sometimes the materials come first and then the idea. Sometimes I start with a word that I want to kind of evoke or illustrate through a piece. So I give myself a lot of permission to do what I want to do. And I think that's what we should do.
Very good. Yeah. So you said word. Okay, so we have a word called noise. So the title of the show is called White Noise. Could you describe what white noise is and how that relates to your work? Or the show in the work in this exhibit, either one of you?
I think we discussed it because I was working in all white, and she works in a lot of white, and then it was like, surprise, we're both working in color. But it still is like a static, like white noise is static a TV makes, right? And I think the reflections of the color and the reflections into each other's work.
Yeah. So you were both using color, but it was also color that was reflective color, and you didn't know that about each other. Okay.
Well, for me too, it's interesting. I think this show is interesting because I have a lot of sculptural work that has a lot of saturated color, and Laura was working with just the monochrome of white. So I think we've both kind of crept closer to each other, where I'm kind of desaturating and you're saturating. When I thought of the title White Noise, I thought of that kind of hum or that energy that is unseen, and I think both of our works, our practices, have a lot of kind of energy and activity to them that, at least when I'm working, I want to make pieces that seem like they could still be in transition, or are they like evolving or decaying, or what kind of part of the cycle is happening with the piece is kind of just like this blank moment where it could keep growing or being removed material-wise. So I like the title in terms of just the energy that's embedded in our work, and that white noise that's always kind of around us, that's this constant energy that we don't really know where it's coming from, but it's ever present, kind of. So.
And it also just describes too the way you use color as reflective, and that's like the visual equivalent of this oral effect of kind of background noise. So I have a question for Laura. So your work has progressed. You're still a very young artist, and you have your whole career ahead of you. But in the past, you've always worked with white on white, and your work always was about, the effects of light and shadow, and then you added the color. And people don't know, though, that you've worked in different mediums before. You want to tell us about that?
So I went to MICA, my undergrad, Maryland Institute, on a painting scholarship, and I considered myself a painter. And then my foundational sculpture class was with a fiber professor, and I immediately got really interested in sculpture. And the work I was making throughout undergrad was like lots of color, lots of beading and crazy saturated color. And then I went off to grad school and I decided to pare everything down a little bit because I just kind of hadn't found my voice yet. And so then I started doing these drawings with my sewing machine on transparent fabric and then layering those. And then my roommate from college had come to visit me in Seattle and was like, you know, you should try etching some glass, and so I started etching drawings on glass and layering those. And then when I first moved back here, I had a show in Mount Vernon, and these pieces were getting kind of ridiculous and they were really heavy and whatever. but I hit the brakes and I broke like 6 pieces in my car. and it was kind of like one of those things where you're like, I don't know if I should be doing this anymore. So I went to my studio and I had a big roll of paper in the corner, and I just laid it out on the table, and I was like, I'm just gonna be a drawer for a little while. So I started drawing, and then I started cutting my drawings. And then that's just kind of how it progressed into this, where I started layering them. Like I did the glass and the paper or the fabric beforehand.
Fabric, you said?
Yeah, I used to do transparent fabric. Yeah. So, and then I just really fell in love with paper. So paper stuck with me longer than I think anything else has.
I think it's interesting to have worked in glass and then to choose paper. They're both very fragile, delicate mediums. So is that what appealed to you about paper, and both of them, or was it the light?
I mean, it's the light.
Okay.
I really like playing with the shadows. It's funny. I mean, like my sisters and my friends can tell you, I'm like kind of I'm aggressive with my work, and I'm like messy and whatever. And so like my art is all clean and precise, and that's like where I put all that energy, I think. So. But I was talking to Chet about this at the opening. I had a professor in sculpture at MICA that really taught us about material, and I didn't really understand it at the time. Like he'd just be like, do the, add this to it, and what, we really limited what we were allowed to use in the class, and then each class he would give us like a little bit more material to use. So at first it was paper, then it was like 2-part rubber, and so string, metal, and I think it really is how I work now. And I didn't really think about it, but it kind of subconsciously has gotten into my process.
And then Andrea, you studied early on printmaking and print media, and actually the book arts. And how does that relate to what you do today?
Yeah, as an undergraduate, actually. It took 5 years to do my undergraduate, and I started as an English major at Carnegie Mellon, and then I moved back to Columbus for a little while to Ohio State and was taking art classes, and finally just admitted that I wanted to be an art major, which I think I wanted to early on, but writing is still a big part of my practice. So then I transferred to the School of Art Institute of Chicago to finish my undergrad, and I was working a lot with the print media department. And I think during that time, I did lithography, etching, screen printing, like the whole gamut, relief printing. But I think at the end of it, I was more interested in just the process. And the end result of the print was, I could kind of give or take it. It wasn't, the process was what was really kind of interesting to me. So going back for my master's, and I was also taking some fiber and material study classes as an undergrad too, which Art Institute is so interdisciplinary, and they had an installation class and an embellishment class where you just embroidered for 8 hours during a class, and so I was really interested in that department. So I went back for my MFA to the fiber and material studies department, and it was just a great experience. It's very wide open. I had peers that were in performance and sculpture and painting, and we were all in the same general understanding of fiber, but it was really just wide open. So in my grad school, I was still playing around with those materials I knew from printmaking, like flat paper and printing on fabric too. And that's kind of how I could understand how to make sculpture, because I hadn't done anything else, but there was something about sculpture. I love painting. I was horrible at painting though. I would get paint everywhere. I think I was impatient with oil paint. It would just be a mess. But just like those formal qualities I wanted to kind of use somehow. So I started back to using paper and fabric in grad school. My paper pieces started there. I was spending a lot of time on the train in Chicago, and there would be the L stops would have painted over whites, but then inevitably there'd be little chips where the, like, I don't know, 50 layers of paint or advertisements would start to kind of poke through. So there was something about that, and I think it's like that facade aspect of art making, and painting is a facade. It's an illusion of space, right? But to kind of harness that or recreate that facade that inevitably gives way to kind of the internal life of an object was really kind of compelling to me. So I wanted to try and make that in my studio to kind of, I kind of even played around with taking photos of those little chipped away areas and maybe printing those, like replicating them through screen printing, and there was just something not there yet, you know, so to make my own layering that I'm just then taking back into was how I started my paper pieces. And my textile pieces, kind of the same way, just piecing together so that they're very related to quilt making, but kind of on my own terms, and they're not very precise, and I will build them in sections and then kind of force them together so that they then start to pop off the wall and undulate and get a little unruly, and I really challenge my sewing machine a lot and abuse my sewing machine a lot given what I'm forcing through the sewing machine. So yeah, so that's kind of where I, like, you know, initially started, and then how it all kind of came up to be now.
And that you like to try different things, I think, is very apparent in the show. And now I want to talk about what's behind us.
Yeah, the elephant in the room.
Yeah. We have this huge, incredible work behind us that's called Reflex Redux. I think it's great because it really illustrates what you do on another level, but it's in a different medium and just installation. And this is just one incarnation of that work. It's had other lives in the past. It has been exhibited here in Columbus and also at ArtPrize.
Yes.
But what we have here in this space is specific to this space.
Yeah.
And do you want to describe what you've done?
Sure.
And that was with, again, you said Jeffrey
Hayes
from
Ohio
OSU.
State,
He
yeah.
was the engineer. I
Yeah,
guess.
it was a collaborative project. And so when I was teaching at CCAD, they curated a show between, it was a really great idea. They curated a show where they asked someone from CCAD and someone from OSU to create a collaboration. And some of the pairings knew each other. Jeff and I did not know each other at all. And they just kind of looked at both of our practices and thought, what if they made a piece? That'd be kind of interesting. So we got together, and he had seen my paper works, and he's very interested in kind of the emotive quality of space and how we can create emotion through space and installation. So we started talking and decided, yeah, what if we took the working logic of my paper pieces, but then applied it to some kind of installation-based form. So there are actually 16 original layers to this piece. They're paper mached. We tore the cavity in each one. We were also thinking about color, because I use a lot of color, and how to create reflective color. So the front sides are white, and so all the color that we're seeing right now is all reflective. And the back sides, which you can see in the space, that once you go to the back of it, you can see that yellow layer. So all the back sides of them are painted saturated color. In the original installation, we had it so it was flipped horizontally, so all the layers were kind of stacking up to the ceiling. Somewhere along the way, we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we put mirrors underneath, so that when you, and I don't know if anybody saw it, and it was at an OSU Urban Art Space, but so we put a paneling of mirrors under it, so that when you walked around it, you would see this cavity reflected in the floor, but you never actually got to see the physical cavity when it was installed at Urban Art Space. So fast forward to this year, and we had talked about it, you know, last year with the gallery about maybe reinstalling it at the Bexley location. And I don't think it would have been a good fit, just in terms of the ceiling heights and the layout of the gallery. But once I saw the new space, I thought, wow, this would be kind of perfect. The fact that you have this long corridor of a space, and then it could be sighted, and there's enough breathing room for it. And so when you enter the gallery, you kind of hit with this void at the end of the gallery, and then you get to interact with it. And that was something we hadn't really planned on until we installed it, the fact that you can then also walk behind it and really interact with it. And it was fun, to say the least, like watching people at both the gallery hop and the opening just taking selfies and like going behind it. And
yeah. I think it's probably the most photographed work Hammond Harkins has ever
Yeah.
had. And it's not just because we're in the short north, it's just because of
it
the
just
work
was,
itself.
yeah, so that in itself was something. I thought that was pretty interesting. And I loved too, you know, as it gets darker during the day, those colors start getting even more and more saturated. So I remember like the end of the night at the gallery hop, seeing people at the back side of it, and they're just kind of glowing yellow, you know, and so I don't know, it's interesting. I wouldn't have necessarily anticipated that extra layer of how are people going to interact with it given this incarnation of it, but yeah.
It's really neat, and it does have its own life here. I like how it changes throughout the day as the light changes outside. In addition to this nice long space leading up to it, we have all those windows, and that's north facing, but the light still does change. And really, it changes very subtly throughout the day, and it's very nice to watch that.
And just one last thing too is also to be able to have the moment where the most like the micro in my practice, like the very smallest of the small meets the macro, the largest of the large version, just paired next to each other was really important to me, to have them kind of be able to meet in person. So, yeah.
Well, I'll ask both of you this last question. Well, we talked about a trajectory for both of you, where your work has been in the past, leading up to where you are today. So where do you see your work going?
I think personally, I'm going to continue playing with color, but also probably going back to all white, just because it's home, you know. But there's some things that have happened with, like, there's a piece in the back, one of the small, longer, narrow pieces, where I painted the back of it pink, but then it reflected in gold on the gold leaf, and it turns it orange. So that's something I want to play with, I think, in the future. And then even just mixing the colors through reflection, like with the gradients, but maybe, I don't know. So I really kind of want to push my work so it's more like an abstraction of pattern, and then also, like, so they're like three-dimensional paintings, you know?
Where do I think I'm always thinking about scale and the interaction of the viewer has with what I'm making. So I definitely am wanting to also do more, Jeff and I would love to do more collaborative projects, but even on my own, doing more kind of installation experiments or, it's interesting. I mean, I feel like I always have an ongoing kind of catalog, and I don't know if you do this, but I have like a kind of catalog in my mind of pieces that I want to make. Yeah. Sometimes I'll make them in 2 months. Sometimes I'll start it and I won't finish it for 2 years. So there's always kind of like multiple pots on the stove, and like it's just a matter of what is kind of speaking to me at the time, or what I have going on in terms of shows or commissions, or just all of it, what I'll end up making, but I think it's just that ultimately it's challenging what you're currently doing and just pushing yourself to the next place, and that makes sense in kind of the trajectory of what I've been working on.
So thank you, everyone, for coming today and for being here.
Thank you.
Both of you, and we are very proud of this show.
Thank you.